All right, so let's get started. So my name is Rebecca Griesbach. I am a current student at the University of Alabama. I'm the editor-in-chief of the school newspaper. I also do some freelance work for the New York Times, doing data journalism. And basically what that means is getting numbers to quantify stories, to give some meat to your stories, give them a little bit of backbone. And what do I mean by that? Think of some things that you could do in your own high school, assuming most of you are high schoolers, that could add a little bit of oomph to your stories. Some kind of numerical components, maybe. For school lunches, a number of things. You could do a survey of how long the lines are. You could do a count of how many workers there are in the line, or maybe something like what type of food is served when. And if you notice any patterns, then that's a story. Another thing like dress code might be looking at policies and seeing how they've changed throughout the years, or surveying boys and girls and seeing how many times they've gotten written up for dress code violations on the whole. Another story maybe about bathrooms would be, I don't know about y'all, but when I was in school, we had like 3 minutes to go to the bathroom. So that's a story that could be used with, numerical data. How like are different classes allowing different bathroom times? How many times a day are you allowed bathroom times? Things like that. You could do the same thing with like how long it takes you to get to class, um, or which shifts have the longest lunch period, or things like that. So all of these are things that you could do with data. Data is not limited to, COVID numbers, or even though that is one that you should definitely be looking at if you're not already, vaccination numbers, how many teachers are vaccinated, how many students are vaccinated. But sorry. um, but yeah, that is, but that's one thing that you could use. So let's see, here's some examples of data journalism. Let me escape real quick. So ProPublica is one of my favorite sites. They have so many amazing graphics and interactive tools that you can use. And they just show, I mean, this one's gotten a lot of traction recently, but they do all of this really cool stuff with data. They basically took videos of all of these people who stormed the Capitol and put that all into like a time lapse to show what really happened. There's some major kind of journalistic questions there that a lot of people have been raising, and they're really interesting. Here's one. I mean, these are things that you can even start to do in high school with kind of simple metrics that affect affect your day-to-day life. So, and when you stories like this, it's just so compelling. I mean, using data stories on top of like the kind of narrative writing that you're already doing is it's basically going to like identify trends, and it's kind of the first step in investigative reporting. And that's the kind of reporting that's going to enact change. This one is also one of my favorites, Highline. They just have really cool web design. But I'm going to leave these up here for y'all to return to if you want. So how do you get data? One thing that you can do is, a lot of data is already available, right? It's on websites, it's on trackers. I'm sure you're used to all the COVID trackers at this point. But on national databases and things like that. But they're not limited to that. If it's something like the school lunches, let's say, that would be data that you would need to collect yourself. You would need to get maybe yourself and some friends, some people in your newsroom to go out there and conduct your own survey. If it's information that you don't have access to, that you can't see for yourself, but you know that your school board has it, pick up the phone and ask them for it. And if they say no, remember that you usually have the law on your side. So I'm not going to get super deep into this, but FOIA request stands for Freedom of Information Act, and you are entitled to any public information. So there are a number of things that don't classify as public information. And FERPA is going to be the biggest thing that affects you as students. It's the Family and Education Rights Protection Act, I think. Don't quote me on that, but basically it protects students. It protects students from confidential information. So like you could not look at your friend's grades. That would be illegal. You couldn't look at, HIPAA is health, so you couldn't look at medical records or things like that without that person's consent. And so, but a lot of times school districts will use those as excuses for not giving you information that you are entitled to. So you need to read those laws and the literature about them and understand what you are able to get. You can get data on well, I'll show you. You can get data on grades as a whole. You can get race data. You can get gender data. You can get zoning data. You can get information on suspensions and expulsions. A lot of the times what you have to do is request that information doesn't have names attached to it. So here are some examples of what professional journalists have done to make this data a little bit more accessible. So again, ProPublica, one of my favorite sites. Miseducation, I believe, is about, it's about discipline rates. So you can search your own school district. So let's say Tuscaloosa City School District. And so it gives me demographics, it gives me high segregation index, which we know that already after, years of reporting on the school system. Black students are 4.1 times as more likely to be suspended than white students. They are using not only demographic data, but they're using discipline data that's required by law to be public information. So you can cite you can cite publications like this that like provide this information, but what you want to do is go to the source. So you see where they have sources and notes. You're going to want to go to the Department of Ed Office of Civil Rights. You're going to want to go to National Center for Education Statistics and do your own research there. This is just to get you started. But see if you notice patterns here and your school is on one of those lists, that's a story. That is a major story. And that's something that you can localize as a student. Another one, this is information you actually have to pay for, but ProPublica has a number of tools that, and a number of data sets, if you go on education, that some of it is higher ed, but some of it is also like national K-12 school data. And some of these are free, so you can download the free ones. Restraint and seclusion. Just make sure that the years are somewhat relevant, but that is all there for you. Another one that I like is EdBuild. This one has mapping data. So this is able to tell, here are some tools, data dashboard. This is one of my favorite sort of reports, just because it's so intuitive, but you can click on your county and a school district inside of it. Tuscaloosa City School District, and it basically shows poverty levels, segregation. And so this is all, I mean, stuff that you can be doing as a high school journalist. These are two professional organizations that have resource guides. Education Writers Association is an amazing organization. And they have things like reporters toolboxes. They have tip sheets for whenever they have conferences kind of like this. And it's never too early to start looking at some of this stuff. You'll get so many story ideas because this is made for reporters who specifically cover education. And that's you. So a lot of the times high school journalists get, you know, left out of that conversation, but that is you right now. Another one, IRE. IRE is Investigative Reporters and Editors. It is not too early to sink your teeth into some investigative stories. And these are some resources that'll help you with that. You might need to become a member. I might ask your advisor about that if you're really interested in it, and you can share things like conference workshops and tip sheets that'll kind of give you guides on how to report on a specific issue. And that one is a much more broad than Education Writers Association. They cover everything: criminal justice, education, health, you name it. And then also scroll through Twitter and find education journalists who you really like. Some of them actually have newsletters. The Lead is one of them. And they often provide tips, advice, resources for student journalists, whether they're college or high school. So like I said earlier, you can easily seek out these numbers. You know, FOIA can be your best friend, right? But you also have access to school board meeting minutes. You have codes of conduct. All of this is data. All of these are documents that you can look at, that you can find trends. City council meeting minutes. Most of the times, stuff that's going to affect your school is going to be talked about at a school board meeting, but I wouldn't shy away from city council as well, because a lot of the times they discuss zoning issues and things like that. Budgets, syllabi, spend a lot of time, maybe in the beginning of the semester, just looking through that stuff. It can seem really, really tedious and really boring, but it makes your reporting so much more robust when you can do that. Large data sets. So this is what I was talking about earlier with some of the stuff that those ProPublica projects had relied on. So all of this information is downloadable through national databases. So this is the Department of Education, Civil Rights. They have some other sections too, but what you should be able to do, they have reports. You can look at those, but what's really going to be interesting is getting all of the data yourself. So let's say Northridge High School, that's where I went to school. Let's not do that just in case. I'm going to just take every year because sometimes they don't survey one year. Oh, I got the zip code wrong. That's why. Okay, so we've got a whole profile here. And I can export that. I can look at all of this stuff, right? And so you want to just spend some time looking through that. You're going to export as a CSV. I mean, these are just different ways. Whatever's a CSV is going to allow you to like play with the numbers. It's basically an Excel sheet. National Center for Education Statistics. This is another huge one. And then, of course, you know, familiarize yourself with these dashboards, specifically the COVID dashboards. I don't know if dashboards are going to become more of a common thing after this pandemic, where agencies have publicly available data right for you. But get familiar with those. And what you want to do with those is not, so they have this data available, right? But it changes every day. If you are really serious about tracking the coronavirus and how it's changed, how many cases have affected your school on a larger level, what you're going to want to do is every day or every week, however many times this dashboard updates, you need to record how many cases they're reporting. That way you can show if like in the past 2 weeks, has it increased a whole lot? Or in the past, 4 months, has it been petering off? Those are trends that you can notice if you're taking that information up every day. And if it gets confusing, I mean, go across the hall and talk to your math teacher. You have resources at your disposal to help you with these kind of there's sort of this myth that journalists are not supposed to be good with numbers or aren't good with numbers, and that especially now could not be less true. I mean, it's so important to understand what numbers mean, and if anything has shown that, it's been this pandemic. And then if you're just now saying, oh crap, I should have been keeping track of all of these numbers since the beginning of the semester. Well, sometimes Wayback Machine will save you. This is a web archive, and you can go back in time and get screenshots of things. So that's just like a tool that I like to use. And yeah, so those are major sources of data. The question is, what do you do with it once you have all of that? I don't know about y'all. I don't know. I was not taught really anything about data, computer science, like spreadsheets at all when I was in high school. I don't know if that's changed. But what you want to get used to is getting organized. So once you have your data, you want to be able to put it in a spreadsheet and organize it in a way that makes sense. And that way you can see patterns. Now, I'm not going to get super into spreadsheet organization because that can be boring. And that's sort of an adventure that you need to have on your own. But if you don't know where to start, there are plenty of resources, especially on IRE, that can help you. Basically, you just want to set things up in a way that'll make sense to you, that shows where there are patterns, that maybe shows changes over time. Again, maybe something that you can talk to your math teacher about. Some more advanced stuff that you don't really have to know, but if you really, really like doing this stuff, and if your school doesn't offer a program like this, school didn't teach me how to code or anything like that, and I barely know now, but there are online sites like Code Academy that can teach you how to organize data, especially if you're working with huge data sets. Most likely, if you're just reporting on your own school system, you won't have to get into that. But if that's something that you want to do long term, or if it's something you want to do as a career, it's definitely a good time to start learning how to do those things. And another thing, once you have your data, you want to know how to visualize it. I don't know how many of you are still doing print papers, but this applies to both print and web. There are tools out there that can help make what you're looking at so much prettier. You know, if you're conducting a survey and you want to show the results of that, there's apps and websites like Data Wrapper. Also, Flourish is a good one, Flourish. And those are sites that basically do all of that for you. There are also, you know, you can look on YouTube and find most of what I, have learned with graphic design is sort of self-taught. And there are a bunch of tutorials on YouTube now that will show you how to make graphs and stuff like that in Adobe Illustrator. And yeah, here, like I said, if you are struggling to find patterns, or you're struggling to make sense of the numbers, ask people. And frankly, like, you're going to want to find sort of an expert source. I remember when I was in high school, I did a story about car wrecks. And the big story was about two people who had died in car accidents. But to illustrate that, I wanted to show like how much force it would take, once you hit a wall or something like that, to be fatal. And so I talked to my physics teacher, and she sort of spelled it all out for me. And then we made an infographic from that. That's using data, not necessarily in the same way, but it's like a kind of compelling component. How to write with data. Okay, so you have all these numbers, right? And I just mentioned the story about two students who had died, or two people who had died in car accidents. Not every story is going to be that sad, right? But what is most important is humanizing these numbers. No one is a number, right? There are people and there are stories behind these numbers. And so I think most importantly is you need to find someone who represents the problem, who represents whatever pattern that you're trying to expose, and talk to them. Try to understand what it's like if you are like a day in their life. If you are writing a story about suspensions, right? And you find that there's disparities, find someone who kind of their story matches what the data is showing. And also find stories of people who go against what the data shows, and and interview them. Use your skills that you already have to tell that story. Just some simple things with data. I mean, even with this presentation now, right? I'm going 90 miles a minute. Slow down, explain. That's what data is kind of notorious for, or data journalism can be kind of scary because you're in this new territory right now, right? Like you have all of these new terms, all of these numbers that you have to break down for people to explain, for people to understand. So spend a lot of time. The 3-number rule, try not to have more than 3 numbers in a single chunk, because at that point, it just gets to be a lot and it kind of goes over people's heads. So instead, try to visualize numbers. Like, is it, X amount of yards, or is it half the size of a football field? That's a way to get around having to say what the number is, but still like give people a numerical image. And this is important, especially if you are covering real issues in your school system, whether it be about the dress code, whether it be about disparities, whether it be about discipline rates. You are lifting the sort of burden of proof. You're lifting this, you're providing evidence for something